The Liberty appeared on Zephyrian sensors like a ghost returning from the dead. For months, the human ship had drifted silently in the outer system, its power signature so low that the aliens had assumed it was nothing more than a derelict hulk. Commander Vex Thulon was shocked when his tactical officer reported that the vessel was now accelerating toward the planet with full power and appeared to be armed for combat. Chief Engineer Roy Sullivan had used every moment of their captivity to transform the colony ship into something the galaxy had never seen before. Working with a skeleton crew of volunteers who had remained aboard, he had rebuilt the Liberty's systems using a combination of human ingenuity and salvaged Zephyrian technology. The ship that now descended toward the planet was no longer a transport vessel but a warship designed by engineers who understood that they would only get one chance to save their people. The space battle that followed revealed the fundamental difference between human and Zephyrian approaches to warfare. The alien fleet had superior numbers, heavier armor, and more powerful weapons, but they fought like individual champions seeking personal glory. Each Zephyrian captain maneuvered his ship to get the best position for himself without coordinating effectively with the rest of the fleet. Roy Sullivan commanded the Liberty like it was part of his own body. Every system on the ship worked together toward a single goal, and his crew responded to orders with precision that seemed almost telepathic. When Zephyrian ships tried to surround and overwhelm the human vessel, they found themselves facing an opponent that seemed to anticipate their every move and counter it before they could complete their attacks. The Liberty did not try to destroy the alien ships, but instead targeted their engines, weapons, and communication systems with surgical precision. Human weapons were designed to disable rather than kill, not out of mercy but because disabled ships could not coordinate with their fleet, while destroyed ships would only make the remaining enemies fight more desperately. Within hours, most of the Zephyrian fleet was drifting helplessly in space while the Liberty maintained complete tactical control of the system. On the planet's surface, the human uprising had spread far beyond the original mountain settlement. Kate Phillips led strike teams that systematically captured Zephyrian outposts across the continent, while Alex Turner coordinated with human prisoners at other facilities who had received signals to begin their own rebellions. The electromagnetic pulse weapons that Ben Cooper had designed proved devastatingly effective against alien technology, and soon entire regions were under human control. Dr. Linda Carter had established a new command center in the captured Zephyrian research facility where she worked to understand and reverse engineer every piece of alien technology they had captured. Her scientific team, expanded to include colonists with technical backgrounds, was making discoveries that would change human civilization forever. They learned how to build faster-than-light engines, energy weapons, and defensive systems that were far in advance of anything Earth had ever produced. The final confrontation came when Commander Vex Thulon, facing the complete collapse of his occupation force, demanded single combat with Jake Morrison. The Zephyrian commander still believed that superior individual strength could overcome human tactics and determination. He challenged Jake to meet him in personal battle, claiming that victory over the human leader would demoralize the resistance and end the conflict. Jake accepted the challenge, knowing that this was more than just a fight between two individuals. Every human and every Zephyrian would be watching to see whether their species' approach to conflict was superior. The battle would determine not just the fate of the human colony, but the future relationship between their civilizations. The combat took place in the central courtyard of the original research facility, with representatives from both species watching from a safe distance. Vex was everything that Zephyrian culture valued: tall, strong, armored by nature, and armed with advanced weapons. Jake was a middle-aged human ship captain who looked fragile and ordinary compared to his alien opponent. But appearances had been deceiving the Zephyrians from the beginning. Jake had spent months preparing for this moment, training with Kate Phillips and Alex Turner while studying recordings of Zephyrian combat techniques. He understood that he could not win through superior strength or natural advantages, but humans had never relied on those things for survival anyway. The battle began with Vex demonstrating his physical superiority, landing powerful blows that would have killed most humans instantly. But Jake used tactics that the Zephyrian had never encountered before. He turned his apparent weaknesses into advantages, using his smaller size and greater agility to avoid attacks while striking at vulnerable points that Zephyrian armor did not protect. More importantly, Jake fought with the knowledge that he was not just representing himself, but every human who had ever been underestimated by stronger opponents. He carried the determination of parents protecting their children, the ingenuity of engineers solving impossible problems, and the cooperation of a species that had learned to survive by working together rather than by dominating others. The turning point came when Vex, frustrated by his inability to land a decisive blow, made the mistake of fighting with anger instead of discipline. Jake seized the opportunity to use the Zephyrian's own strength against him, redirecting a powerful attack in a way that left his opponent off balance and vulnerable. The final moments of the combat demonstrated everything that made humans dangerous: adaptability, intelligence, and an absolute refusal to give up even when facing seemingly impossible odds. When Commander Vex fell defeated, the last organized Zephyrian resistance collapsed. Alien survivors throughout the system began surrendering to human forces, and Dr. Kral Vorthak sent a desperate message to the Zephyrian High Command that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. His transmission was brief but devastating in its implications. "We were wrong about everything. They appear weak because they have never needed to be strong. They appear fragile because they have never been truly threatened. But when pushed beyond their limits, they become something we cannot defeat. They are not the helpless prey we thought them to be. They are predators who have been sleeping, and we have awakened them." The human colony was established successfully, but the people who built it were no longer the same ones who had left Earth seeking a peaceful new life. They had been transformed by necessity into something the galaxy had never seen before: a species that combined technological innovation, tactical brilliance, and an unbreakable will to survive. They had proven that true strength comes not from individual power, but from the ability to adapt, cooperate, and become whatever circumstances require. As Jake Morrison stood looking up at the stars from the surface of humanity's new world, he knew that their victory here was only the beginning. Word of what had happened would spread throughout the galaxy, and other species would reassess their assumptions about the newcomers from Earth. Humanity had announced its presence in the universe in a way that no one would ever forget. The Zephyrians had learned too late that humanity's greatest strength was never their technology or their individual capabilities. It was their ability to transform apparent weaknesses into decisive advantages and to become more dangerous, the more desperately they were challenged. The universe would never underestimate them again. The moment that changed everything came on a cold morning when Zephyrian transport ships landed near the human settlement. Sub-Commander Grix Malthan emerged with a squad of heavily armed soldiers and announced that all human children would be separated from their parents for special study at a different facility. Dr. Kral Vorthak had decided that young humans might be more adaptable and easier to train as workers if they were isolated from adult influence during their development. The Zephyrians expected the usual human response of quiet compliance mixed with emotional distress. Instead, they encountered something they had never seen before in any species they had conquered. Every human adult in the settlement moved to form a protective barrier around their children. Jake Morrison stepped forward and told Grix that the children would not be taken anywhere without their parents. Grix found this amusing and ordered his soldiers to stun any humans who interfered with the collection process. That was when he discovered that the pathetic creatures he had been guarding for months were no longer the same beings who had arrived as helpless prisoners. The first Zephyrian soldier who tried to grab young Casey Davis found himself facing Kate Phillips, and what happened next shocked every alien witness. Kate moved with speed and precision that seemed impossible for such a fragile creature. She disarmed the soldier before he could activate his weapon and used his own equipment to stun him unconscious. Before other Zephyrians could react, Alex Turner and a dozen other humans emerged from concealed positions throughout the settlement, carrying weapons that no one had seen them build. The electromagnetic pulse devices that Ben Cooper had constructed, with Linda Carter's help, activated simultaneously across the entire area. Zephyrian communications equipment, weapons, and even their protective armor systems shut down instantly. The aliens found themselves facing enemies who were not only armed, but who seemed to know exactly how their technology worked and how to counter it. What truly terrified the Zephyrians was not just that humans could fight back, but how they fought. Every human action supported the actions of others around them. When one person attacked, others provided cover and backup automatically. When someone was wounded, others immediately moved to protect and treat them without being told what to do. The humans fought like a single organism with many bodies instead of like individual warriors seeking personal victory. Grix tried to call for support from his orbital ships, but his communication equipment remained dead from the electromagnetic interference. He ordered his remaining soldiers to fall back to their landing site, but found the route blocked by human fighters who seemed to appear from nowhere. Ben Cooper's engineering skills had been used to create not just weapons, but an entire network of hidden passages and defensive positions throughout the settlement. The battle spread quickly as more Zephyrian forces tried to respond to the emergency. But every new group of aliens who arrived found themselves facing opponents who had studied their tactics for months and knew how to counter every move they made. Lisa Parker's natural enhancers had given human fighters reflexes and endurance that matched or exceeded alien capabilities, while their superior coordination and tactical thinking provided advantages that raw physical strength could not overcome. Commander Vex Thulon watched the situation deteriorate from his flagship in no orbit and could not believe what his sensors were telling him. The same humans who had barely been able to walk properly in high altitude just months ago were now defeating trained Zephyrian soldiers with apparent ease. His science officer, Kral Vorthak, kept insisting that there must be some mistake in their readings because the human physical capabilities they were observing should have been impossible. But there was no mistake. The humans had transformed themselves through months of careful preparation and shared determination. The cooperation that Zephyrians had interpreted as weakness was actually their greatest tactical advantage. The apparent fragility that had made them seem harmless was revealed to be adaptability that allowed them to become whatever they needed to be in order to survive and protect their families. Jake Morrison coordinated the human response from a command center that Ben Cooper had built in the depths of the settlement's hidden tunnel system. Reports came in from teams throughout the area as human fighters systematically captured Zephyrian equipment and positions. Linda Carter worked alongside him, analyzing alien technology and finding new ways to turn captured weapons against their former owners. The most devastating blow to Zephyrian morale came when Kate Phillips led a strike team that captured the main guard tower overlooking the settlement. The aliens had built the structure to be impregnable, with overlapping fields of fire and multiple redundant systems. But human engineers had spent months studying the building and had found weaknesses that its designers never imagined anyone would discover. The assault on the tower demonstrated everything that made humans dangerous opponents. The attack came from multiple directions simultaneously, using routes that should have been impossible to access. The defenders found their weapons useless against fighters who seemed to know exactly where each gun was positioned and how to avoid its field of fire. Most importantly, the humans worked together so seamlessly that the Zephyrians could not predict what any individual attacker would do, because every action was part of a larger plan. When the tower fell, its communication equipment became another tool for human forces. Linda Carter quickly figured out how to use Zephyrian technology to contact other alien positions and provide false information that sent reinforcements into carefully prepared ambushes. The humans were not just winning individual battles. They were systematically dismantling the entire occupation force through superior intelligence and coordination. The transformation of the human settlement into a military base happened so quickly that Zephyrian observers could barely track the changes. Buildings that had looked like desperate survival shelters revealed hidden weapons storage areas and communication centers. Gardens that had seemed like pathetic attempts at growing food turned out to be carefully planned defensive positions with clear fields of fire. Even the children had been trained to serve as messengers and scouts using routes through the tunnel system that adults could not access. Dr. Kral Vorthak finally understood that everything the Zephyrians had believed about humans was completely wrong. These creatures had not been surviving despite their weaknesses. They had been preparing to use apparent weaknesses as camouflage for deadly strengths. Their cooperation was not a sign of desperation. but evidence of a species that could function as a unified fighting force without losing individual initiative and creativity. As night fell over the mountain settlement, human forces controlled most of the area that had been their prison just hours earlier. Zephyrian survivors huddled in a few remaining strongholds and sent desperate messages to their fleet in orbit, requesting immediate evacuation. The weak and fragile creatures they had captured were revealed to be predators who had been studying their prey carefully before striking. But the battle on the planet's surface was only the beginning. High above them, Chief Engineer Roy Sullivan had spent the day making final preparations aboard the Liberty. The ship that Zephyrians had dismissed as a harmless transport vessel was about to show them what human engineering could accomplish when survival was at stake. The real war was just beginning, and the aliens were about to learn why you should never underestimate a species that has nothing left to lose. Commander Vex Thulon stood on the observation deck of his ship looking down at the mountain region where his forces were preparing to relocate the human prisoners. The area was perfect for testing the limits of these weak creatures. The air was thin enough that most species would struggle to breathe. The temperature dropped below freezing at night and rose to dangerous levels during the day. Rocky terrain made walking difficult, and there was very little water or food available naturally. Vex expected that many humans would die within the first few weeks. This would give Dr. Kral Vorthak valuable data about how long fragile species could survive in harsh conditions. The survivors, if any, would be even more dependent on their captors and easier to control. It seemed like a perfect solution that would provide useful scientific information while reducing the cost of feeding and housing so many prisoners. The transport to the mountains was deliberately uncomfortable. The Zephyrians loaded humans into cargo containers with minimal life support and no cushioning for the rough ride. Jake Morrison tried to keep people calm during the journey, but everyone could feel that something bad was about to happen. Lisa Parker used the time to check on the sick and elderly, while Alex Turner and Kate Phillips quietly moved through the containers, making sure everyone understood to stay together once they landed. When the containers opened at their destination, the humans found themselves in a landscape that looked like pictures of Mars from their old textbooks. Red rocks jutted up from barren ground under a sky that seemed too bright and too thin. The air burned their lungs when they tried to breathe normally, and many people immediately started coughing and feeling dizzy from the altitude. Sub-Commander Grix Malthan addressed the group of humans who stood shivering in the cold mountain air. He told them that they would be given basic shelter materials and a small amount of food and water. After that, they would need to survive on their own. Any attempt to leave the designated area would result in immediate death from orbital weapons. The Zephyrian guards would watch from a safe distance to record data about human survival capabilities. What happened next surprised every Zephyrian observer. Instead of panicking or collapsing from despair, the humans immediately began organizing themselves. Kate Phillips, the former Army Ranger, took charge of finding the best locations for shelters. She had Alex Turner help her identify areas that would provide protection from wind, while remaining hidden from the watchtowers the Zephyrians had set up around the perimeter. Ben Cooper gathered a group of people around him and started explaining how to build effective shelters using the limited materials they had been given. He showed them techniques for creating walls that would hold heat and roofs that would shed the frequent rainstorms. Within hours, humans were working in teams to construct not just individual shelters, but a connected community of buildings that shared resources and provided mutual protection. Dr. Linda Carter immediately began studying their new environment. She collected samples of soil, water, and local plants while making careful observations about weather patterns and geological features. What she discovered made her more excited than she had been since before their capture. The mountain region was rich in rare minerals that could be used to create advanced electronic devices, and some of the local plant life had properties that could be very useful if properly prepared. Lisa Parker worked with Linda to identify which plants might be safe for humans to eat and which ones might have medicinal properties. They found several species that could help with the altitude sickness that was affecting many colonists. More importantly, they discovered fungi that seemed to enhance human reflexes and endurance when consumed in small amounts. Lisa began secretly adding these natural enhancers to food preparations for people who needed to do physical work. The Zephyrian observers reported that humans were surviving better than expected, but they attributed this to the species being tougher than initial scans had suggested. They did not recognize that what they were seeing was not just survival, but preparation. The humans were not simply trying to stay alive. They were building infrastructure for something much more ambitious. Jake Morrison established a communication network throughout the human settlement, using a combination of hand signals, message runners, and simple mechanical devices built by Ben Cooper. He organized work crews that appeared to be focused on basic survival, but were actually creating hidden supply caches and secret passages between buildings. Every human in the community had multiple jobs, and everyone understood their role in the larger plan that was slowly taking shape. Kate Phillips began what looked like fitness training to help people adapt to the high altitude and difficult terrain. In reality, she was conducting military training sessions disguised as health programs. Former soldiers like Alex Turner helped teach civilians how to move quietly, how to work together in small teams, and how to use improvised weapons effectively. The training was gradual and seemed natural to the Zephyrian guards who watched from their towers. The most important development was happening in the workshops that Ben Cooper had established. Working with materials that Linda Carter identified as useful, he began creating devices that would have impressed engineers on Earth. The Zephyrians saw humans working with metal and electronics and assumed they were just trying to make their lives more comfortable. They had no idea that sophisticated weapons and communication equipment were being constructed right under their noses. Dr. Linda Carter made her most important discovery after 2 months in the mountains. The unique combination of minerals in the local soil could be used to create electromagnetic pulse devices that would disrupt Zephyrian technology. She shared this information with Ben Cooper, who immediately understood the implications. If they could build enough of these devices and coordinate their use properly, they could blind their captors and level the playing field significantly. Meanwhile, far above them in orbit, Chief Engineer Roy Sullivan had been working around the clock to repair the damaged Liberty. The Zephyrians had disabled the engines but had not destroyed the ship completely, assuming that the weak humans aboard posed no threat. Roy had spent months slowly restoring power to critical systems while staying hidden from Zephyrian sensors. He was now in contact with Jake Morrison through a communication system so subtle that their captors had no idea it existed. The Zephyrian guards continued to see exactly what they expected to see: weak humans struggling to survive in a harsh environment, but somehow managing to avoid dying as quickly as predicted. They interpreted human cooperation as a sign of desperation rather than strength. They saw construction projects as pathetic attempts to create comfort rather than strategic preparation for war. Dr. Kral Vorthak visited the human settlement regularly to conduct his studies, never realizing that each visit gave the humans more information about Zephyrian technology and behavioral patterns. Lisa Parker had become expert at hiding the effects of the natural enhancers she was distributing, so Kral's medical scans continued to show humans as physically inferior to other known species. But something was changing in the humans themselves. Months of harsh conditions, physical training, and shared purpose had transformed the soft colonists who had first arrived in the system. They moved with more confidence now. Their eyes were harder and more focused. They worked together with an efficiency that would have impressed military units anywhere in the galaxy. The Zephyrians remained completely unaware that they were no longer guarding prisoners but were instead surrounded by an army that was almost ready to reveal itself. The humans had used every moment of their captivity to study their enemies, learn their weaknesses, and prepare for the moment when they would show the universe what happens when you underestimate the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The transport ships that took humans down to the planet were nothing like the comfortable passenger shuttles they were used to. The Zephyrians loaded them into cargo holds like they were moving boxes instead of living people. Jake Morrison tried to keep everyone calm during the rough ride down to the surface, but he could see the fear in their eyes. Children cried while their parents held them close. Elderly colonists who had been looking forward to seeing a new world now wondered if they would live long enough to see another day. The prison camp that the Zephyrians built for them looked like a collection of metal boxes dropped randomly onto the ground. The buildings had no windows and only small vents for air. Each family got a tiny room with just enough space for sleeping. There was one larger building where they were fed once a day, and another where the Zephyrian scientists did their tests. Dr. Kral Vorthak was very excited about studying humans. He had never seen such weak creatures before, and he wanted to understand how they had managed to survive long enough to build spaceships. He set up his equipment in the largest building and started bringing humans in for examination. He measured their bones and found them to be much thinner than any other species he knew. He tested their strength and discovered that even their strongest warriors could barely lift what a young Zephyrian could carry easily. The Zephyrian guards found watching humans to be almost boring. Sub-Commander Grix Malthan had been put in charge of security, but there seemed to be no need for it. The humans were so fragile that they spent most of their time just trying to stay comfortable. They needed the temperature to be exactly right or they would get sick. They had to eat several times a day or they would become weak and tired. They even needed special time for sleeping, something that strong species could do without for days at a time. But some of the things humans did puzzled the Zephyrians. When little Casey Davis got sick with a fever, every adult human in the camp wanted to help. They shared their food with the family even though they did not have much for themselves. Dr. Linda Carter, who the Zephyrians thought was some kind of scientist, spent hours taking care of the child even though she was not related to her. Lisa Parker, who seemed to be their medical person, worked day and night to make the girl better, using only basic supplies. This behavior made no sense to the Zephyrians. In their culture, weak individuals were left behind so the strong could survive. Helping someone who might die anyway was a waste of resources that could be used by healthier members of the group. But humans seemed to think that every single person was important, even the sick ones and the very young ones and the old ones who could not work very hard. Even more strange was how humans dealt with their situation. Instead of accepting that they were prisoners and waiting to be told what to do, they started making small changes to their environment. Ben Cooper, who had been a farmer on Earth, began teaching other colonists how to make their small rooms more comfortable using scraps of material they found around the camp. He showed them how to create better airflow and how to make simple furniture from pieces of metal and cloth. Lisa Parker did not just treat sick people. She started walking around the camp studying the local plants that grew near the prison. She collected samples and tried to figure out which ones might be useful for medicine. The Zephyrian guards thought this was funny because the plants were clearly not meant for human consumption, but Lisa kept working anyway. Dr. Linda Carter was perhaps the most puzzling human of all. Even though the Zephyrians had taken away all her scientific equipment, she continued doing research. She found ways to build simple tools from trash and broken pieces of Zephyrian technology. She studied the soil and the air and the water, making notes on pieces of cloth since she had no paper. The guards could not understand why she bothered since there was nothing she could do with the information. Captain Jake Morrison spent his time walking around the camp talking to people. He did not have any official power since they were all prisoners, but somehow people felt better after talking to him. He helped settle arguments between families who were stressed from living in such close quarters. He organized work groups to keep the camp clean and to help distribute food fairly. He even started holding meetings where people could talk about their problems and work together to solve them. Sergeant Alex Turner and Kate Phillips were perhaps the most interesting humans to watch. They had both been soldiers, and the Zephyrians expected them to try to fight back somehow. Instead, they seemed to be helping other humans stay healthy. They organized exercise groups where people would move around together in patterns that looked almost like dancing. They taught children games that involved running and jumping. The Zephyrian guards thought this was a waste of energy, but the humans seemed to enjoy it. What the Zephyrians did not understand was that these activities were not random. The humans were adapting to their new situation in ways that their captors could not recognize. The exercise groups that Alex and Kate organized were actually training sessions where former soldiers taught civilians basic military movements disguised as fitness routines. Ben Cooper's helpful tips about improving living conditions were actually lessons about engineering and construction that could be used for other purposes later. Dr. Kral Vorthak noticed some strange things in his medical examinations of humans. When he put them under stress during his tests, Their bodies produced chemicals that seemed to make them stronger and faster for short periods of time. Their heart rate would increase and their muscles would work better than normal. He had never seen this kind of reaction in other species, but he wrote it off as a temporary survival response that would not last long. The Zephyrian scientist also noticed that humans seemed to recover from injuries faster when they were around other humans who cared about them. A human who was treated by Lisa Parker and visited by friends would heal quicker than one who was left alone. This made no medical sense to Kral, so he decided it must be some kind of mental weakness that made humans imagine they felt better. After 3 months in the camp, the Zephyrians were getting bored with their human subjects. The creatures were exactly as weak and pathetic as they had first appeared. Commander Vex Thulon decided it was time to move them to a more challenging environment to see how long they could survive. He wanted to test their limits and maybe get some useful data about how fragile species dealt with harsh conditions. The Zephyrians had no idea that they were about to make the worst mistake in their empire's history. They saw cooperation as weakness, adaptation as desperation, and human determination as simple stubbornness. They were about to learn that the most dangerous predator is often the one that does not look dangerous at all. The massive ship UES Liberty moved through space like a giant metal whale swimming through an ocean of stars. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge looking at the screens that showed their new home ahead. After 3 years of travel from Earth, 50,000 humans were finally close to the planet they hoped to call home. The blue and green world looked perfect from this distance, with white clouds swirling around continents that reminded Jake of Earth before the wars and pollution made life so hard there. Dr. Linda Carter worked at her station nearby, watching the readings from their sensors. She had been studying this planet for months as they got closer, and something was not right. Strange energy patterns came from the surface, patterns that did not match what a natural planet should show. She had told Jake about this several times, but they had nowhere else to go. Earth was dying, and this was their only chance for a new beginning. The colonists on the ship were ordinary people, farmers like Ben Cooper who wanted to grow food on fertile alien soil, doctors like Lisa Parker who hoped to build hospitals and help people stay healthy, former soldiers like Alex Turner and Kate Phillips who had signed up to protect the colony from any dangers they might find, children like young Casey Davis who had never seen a real sky or breathed air that was not recycled through machines. As the Liberty moved into orbit around the planet, Linda noticed something on her screens that made her heart race. Large objects were moving out from behind the planet's biggest moon, objects that were definitely not natural. She called Jake over to look at what she had found. The objects were ships and they were huge, much bigger than the Liberty. Jake ordered the crew to prepare for contact with whoever owned these ships. He hoped they would be friendly, but years of military training told him to be ready for anything. The alien ships moved toward them with purpose, not like explorers but like hunters who had found their prey. The first alien ship that contacted them was massive and dark, covered in armor that looked like it was built for war. When the communication channel opened, the face that appeared on their screen was nothing like humans had imagined aliens might look like. The creature was tall with thick gray skin that looked like natural armor. Its eyes were small and cold, and when it spoke its voice sounded like gravel falling down a metal tube. Commander Vex Thulon of the Zephyrian Empire did not waste time with polite greetings. He told Jake that humans had entered Zephyrian space without permission and must surrender immediately or be destroyed. Jake tried to explain that they were peaceful colonists looking for a new home, that they would be happy to share the planet or find somewhere else to live. Vex listened to this with what looked like amusement. The Zephyrian science officer Kral Vorthak ran scans of the human ship while Vex talked. What he found made him almost laugh out loud. These creatures called humans were the weakest species he had ever seen. Their bones were thin and would break easily. Their skin offered no protection at all. They had no natural weapons like claws or fangs. Even worse, they needed special air to breathe and would die quickly in most natural environments. Kral shared his findings with Vex, who found the information very interesting. Here was a species that had somehow learned to travel between stars, despite being so fragile that a strong wind might hurt them. They were like children playing with tools too dangerous for them to understand. Vex decided that these humans might be useful as workers or subjects for study, but they were certainly no threat to the mighty Zephyrian Empire. The Zephyrians had conquered dozens of star systems and defeated species much stronger than these pathetic humans appeared to be. Some of their enemies had natural armor that could stop energy weapons. Others were so strong they could tear metal with their bare hands. A few could survive in the vacuum of space without any protection at all. But humans looked like they would fall over if you pushed them too hard. Vex gave Jake one more chance to surrender peacefully. Jake looked around at his bridge crew and saw the fear in their eyes, but also saw determination. These people had traveled across the galaxy to find a new home for their families. They had left everything behind on Earth and had nothing to go back to. Jake told Vex that they were peaceful people who just wanted to live in harmony with any other species on the planet. Vex found this response boring. He had hoped for at least some show of defiance that would make the conquest more interesting. Instead, these humans were begging like scared children. He ordered his weapons officers to disable the human ship but not destroy it. The humans would be more valuable alive, and besides, it would be interesting to study creatures so weak that they had somehow managed to build spaceships. The Zephyrian weapons hit the Liberty with precision strikes that knocked out the engines, but left the life support systems working. Jake felt the ship shudder as power went out across several decks. Emergency lights came on, and alarms started ringing throughout the ship. Linda worked frantically at her station trying to get sensors back online while Alex Turner coordinated with security teams throughout the ship. But there was nothing they could do. The Zephyrian ship surrounded the Liberty like wolves around a wounded deer. Vex contacted Jake again and told him to prepare his people for transport to the planet's surface. They would be kept alive for study and possibly used as workers if they proved useful. Any resistance would result in immediate death. Jake looked out at the planet that was supposed to be their new home and realized it had instead become their prison. The Zephyrians saw humans as weak and fragile creatures who posed no threat to anyone. They had no idea that they had just made the biggest mistake in the history of their empire. But Jake did not know this yet either. Right now, he only knew that his people needed him to keep them alive and find a way to survive whatever was coming next.